So from a young age, I was very inspired to figure out who the hell is flying through these canyons and dropping retardant in front of these firefighters. The type of pilots that make it are a little bit different. Firefighting's cool, and with the advent of social media, it's kind of in your face a little bit more to see this really exciting type of flying. Really aggressive, looks like we're hanging it out there all the time, we're on the bitter edge and we're flying to infernos.
Aviators, welcome to Flight Club. I'm your host, Jason Middleton. I'm a pilot, I'm an aviation entrepreneur, and I'm a huge fan of the people that make up our diverse aviation community. Today's guest on Flight Club is a unique breed among aviators and part of a group of pilots that are the unsung heroes in aviation. He flies aerial fire tankers, and I'm talking big aerial tankers. He's flown the DC-10, MD-87, DC-10. He's fought fires all over the planet. He's currently based out of California, flying the new Boeing 737 fire tanker. He's even a winemaker. Aviators, welcome Shawn Dugan.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to Flight Club, Shawn.
Very humbled to be here. Very surreal. I think when you hear your own resume read off, it's a little bit, really?
You've done a lot of, there's so much stuff in your resume. We're going to get into all of it. This is a lot, but I'm really excited to have you on because, aerial firefighting is such a visible thing. People see it, but we don't know much about it. Like the world doesn't know much about it. And even in the aviation community, we don't really know much about it. I think you guys are like this little secret society of guys that do crazy shit. Thank you for coming on. I have so many things to talk about and questions to ask you and we're going to get into all of it, but I've been wanting to ask an aerial firefighter this question for years. Is aerial firefighting one of the most dangerous jobs in aviation?
Straight into it, huh? Aerial firefighting is inherently dangerous, but it's as dangerous as the pilot in command or the aircraft, whoever's controlling the aircraft decides it to be. Because really it's a measure of self-discipline and it's a measure of knowing your environment and always kind of flying at not 100% capacity. So if you allow it to eat you up, it will. If you are more... if you're okay with taking those higher risks, then it's extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
But if you can fly conservatively and do a lot of after action reviews, learn from your mistakes, recover, and fly at a more conservative level, not really.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say.
But I mean, it's, when I think of, in aviation, there's all these varying things we do in aviation, right? From airlines that are just extremely rigid, procedural oriented, very controlled environment. My side of the industry, the corporate jet side's very controlled environments. Everything we do is precise. ILS approaches, everything is very precise. And just the fact that you guys are operating in these insane, unpredictable, varying environments already adds a level of danger to the job. How do you tell me about the relationship with risk as an aerial firefighter?
A couple different levels with that. First one, I would say it is about managing risk when you're in there, but it's also about managing chaos because you have so many inputs coming in, not only dealing with the fire and the environment around it and the weather, but you're dealing with other aircraft and airspace and, any agency requirements that may be ruling that fire. And so you can't necessarily just jump into a fire and start fighting it. There's a process that comes to it to keep it. We always talk about balancing safety and effectiveness.
Yeah.
Because if you're overly safe, you may as well not be out there because you're not going to be effective. If you're overly effective, it means you're probably hanging it out there and flying to your 100% capacity, where we teach our guys to fly at 75%.
Oh yeah. You mentioned that already. What does that mean?
75% capacity. So if I were to use 100% of my skill set to put a drop in, then I don't have any options if something were to go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm laying it all out there with energy, with my controllability of the aircraft and what the aircraft can actually do.
Yeah.
Now, if I were to back off 25% and always have room, extra energy, let's say, maybe a little extra altitude on approach.
Yeah.
And let's say it's something like this. So if you were to put in a drop and it's in flat terrain and you were to drag it in at 300 feet where the drop altitude's 200 feet, you don't have any airspeed or any altitude to be able to trade that altitude for airspeed. So your energy is all set there.
Yeah.
So now you're kind of at the 100% of the aircraft's capability because you have a handful of power, you have a dirty wing, and you're just pushing all that parasitic drag or drag through the air. And you're really flying at a much higher capacity than you need to be. Where if you came in high and descended down a nice profile of that 300 feet, you always have altitude and options and energy available to get yourself out of that situation. Yeah. Does that make sense?
That totally does. Okay. And then I'm as you gain, when you're, I'm guessing as you gain experience, that window gets bigger. Your 100% becomes bigger than it was.
That's right.
The year before.
Yep.
And like what's, there's so much about the mindset and risk factors, and I want to get into that, but I want to understand the job of being an aerial fighter and the, like what you guys do, the logistics behind it. And I think I want to start with like, what drew you to aerial firefighting? There's so many jobs in aviation. That's one of them.
Yeah.
What was the deal?
When I was a kid, I used to be one of the airport hangers, the kids that hang on the fence, and I'd go out there and I'd have my mom drive me out there first. And then when I was able to drive my own car, there was an active fire. I'd go drive to the airbase and hang on the fence because my dad was an engine captain in town. I lived in separate houses from my dad, but we still had a great relationship. And he would come home when I was over there and he'd tell me about flying with the tankers that day. So from a young age, I was very inspired to figure out who the hell is flying through these canyons and dropping retardant in front of these firefighters. Yeah. That just sounded super appealing. The whole nap of the earth flying sounded great because you get that perspective.
And you weren't a pilot yet.
I wasn't. I don't have any pilots in my family, in my direct family. Yeah. So the pilot thing was completely foreign to me. And standing at the fence, watching the tankers load, I had that it just seemed so ambiguous. I had no idea how you got into one of those airplanes. And so I would just start hustling and getting in. And eventually I worked up the courage to go into the tanker base and start talking to the guys. Yeah. And even though I wasn't met with the best reception, I stayed consistent.
So it kept coming around?
I kept coming around. Yeah. And when I'd hit a dead end, I just figured out a new way to start making phone calls. And the passion was alive enough that I never lost it, even though I hit 3 or 4 dead ends and I was told to give up a couple times.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I just stuck to it. And it really paid off. It's a risk that I didn't know it was going to pay off, but in that case, I was willing to take it because for whatever reason, it just really seemed like what I was meant to do.
Yeah. And it's, did you ever even consider any other facets of aviation?
Flying? I flew corporate for a short amount of time. Yeah. And I flew for the airlines. Yeah. I learned in a short 3 years that the airlines were not for me.
You were just bored as hell.
Bored as hell. I could fly those SOPs just as good as anybody else. And like to show off, I would turn off my flight director in VFR conditions and fly at ILS perfectly. You
rebel. God,
that doesn't get me off. It just doesn't feel good in LaGuardia after 3-hour floor control. I really like to think creatively. I like, when you zoom out and you think about why you wanted to start flying as a kid. Yeah. A lot of us had those dreams of flying our bodies. Mm-hmm. And I did specifically. I remember one where I was hunched over, and I'd tweak certain parts of my body and I'd start flying in different ways. And so now I could feel like how I could control my body through the air. And I was learning my body as I was flying it. And I just had the most huge elation come through me. And when I woke up, just stoked. Yeah. And as I started flying, progressing my career, I realized that when the airplane becomes an extension of you, you're no longer thinking about flying. You're not looking at RPM settings. You're not looking at manifold pressure. You're not looking at anything else besides what the wing is telling you. Yeah. And it doesn't become a feat of engineering anymore. You're not doing it by the numbers. You're doing it 100% by feel.
Yeah. Seat of your pants.
100% seat of your pants flying.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you bring that dream up. I had that as a kid too.
You did?
Yeah. Like I remember, that just jarred my memory. I remember as a kid, and I had no ambitions of being a pilot. And I would have these dreams where I would go fly. It was, I just remember that. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. I
so
mean,
cool.
And we're still doing it.
There we are.
In the airlines, I just felt trapped by the autopilot, by the FMC, which is our flight management computer. Yeah. By a flight plan. I never had FMC uplink, so at least we got to type it in. But now you just push a button, your whole flight plan's loaded. Yeah. Rotate, turn the autopilot on, 100 feet before landing, turn the autopilot off. And I just
that's my job. That's what I do.
So I'm not trying to bag on your job, you know. It just wasn't for me.
Well, it's like the airplanes are so sophisticated now. We're really managing systems. Like I fly G550s, Gulfstreams.
Those are cool airplanes.
Yeah, it's a fantastic piece of equipment. But everything's data link. Everything the airplane's talking to ATC. You plug everything in, you program it, and autopilot's on at a couple hundred feet, and it's off at a couple hundred feet. And the airplane, we're just there monitoring, and it's a very different world. And I always have this, like, I've always been a pilot that I always had a job. I never flew for fun. And I'm kind of getting to this point in my life where I got to start flying for some fun and doing some of this bush flying with these super rad airplanes parked behind us here.
Oh, the humbling machines.
They're so cool.
Yeah.
I love these things. Look at that.
And that's the purest form of flying, because even though I have an Era 760, which is a touchscreen, I hardly ever program it, because once I put a magenta line on there, I almost feel indentured to it. To where if I deviate from it, now I'm losing efficiency. I'm not getting there as fast as I can.
Yeah.
Where if I just lift off and I don't program it, but I put the screen up so I have my traffic to help back me up from the windscreen, because that's primary.
Yeah.
It's just so freeing. And now I'm looking at I live in Santa Margarita, California, and that valley goes all the way to New Cuyama off 166.
Yeah.
And there's no wilderness zones. There's not a lot of houses. You're just out there cruising, and you're just one with nature.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're reading the wind, and you're on the upwind side, and you get a little lift by not adding any power, but just by reading the air.
Yeah.
And it's something so pure about that.
Isn't there a bush strip out there right by New Cuyama, up on the hill, on the side of the hill?
I haven't been there.
I think there's a strip out there.
Like on the side. King of Kunk.
Yeah, there is a little runway at New Cuyama, but then there's one up on the hill, like a bush site up there.
See, I only just bought my 180 down here, so I'm brand new into this bush flying on the Central Coast.
Yeah, are you like getting into that community a lot?
Not really. I'm not home a lot,
so
I have 2 kids, so I tend to really invest my time in them right now. But eventually, when I get a little more advanced in my airplane, I think. Yeah,
nice. What kind of pilots? I'm gonna get back to the aerial firefighters. What kind of people are drawn to that side of the business? Because by the way, this is probably the first time I've ever actually sat down and had a conversation with a real aerial firefighter.
Yeah.
So all the pilots I know are a little bit different. So what kind of pilots are drawn to this? Tell me about the guys you work with. Guys you work with.
Type of pilots, we get a lot of people that are drawn to it, but the type of pilots that make it are a little bit different. Firefighting's cool, and with the advent of social media, now it's being put out there more, and it's kind of in your face a little bit more to see this like really exciting type of flying that looks really aggressive and looks like we're hanging it out there all the time. We're on the bitter edge and we're flying to infernos. I just had a Instagram post that somebody else posted of one of my drops get 9.8 million views.
Yeah.
Because it almost looks like I crashed.
Yeah.
But it was a routine drop that wasn't any sort of.
And the red FOS check coming out of it's so dramatic.
Yeah, it's such in your face.
Thing, yeah.
And usually when people are even driving their car, they'll pull over and be like, what is that? You know? So you'll get people that are just excited about that.
Yeah.
And then we'll get people that are excited about hand flying aircraft and getting to know what flying an airplane actually is all about, and leveling up from just a normal pilot to an air tanker pilot, which is you have to have a lot of connection with your airplane.
Yeah.
And then we'll get guys that just don't want to do the airlines, and they don't want to fly crop dusters anymore. So they've gone up through that way and have worked their way in. So we have a whole mixed bag of backgrounds. A lot of my friends came from Alaska, and they did they did the Alaska bush flying for years, and they just needed to make a little bit more, maybe want to change the scenery and do something different. And they found air tanker flying, and now they're absolutely hooked.
They're hooked, yeah.
And they're doing great.
Are they?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it seems like it's it's the people that are drawn to it are like adventure seekers, and they want to kind of have more spirit in their life, and being out. We had a guest on the podcast earlier, and he's just full of life and like the flying in the bush and landing in fields, and it's just a different type of human, I think.
Yeah. Because you don't want to be connected with your computer. You want to be connected to your surroundings.
Yeah.
And that's what bush flying is. That's what tanker flying is. You have to be connected to the environment, because there's so many different inputs that it's important to feel that.
Yeah.
And I know I told you earlier that, you know, we attract a lot of cowboys, and I realized that could have been misconstrued the more I thought about it. And I was more talking about cowboy in the sense of a guy that, you know, takes care of his horses when nobody's looking, you know,
Right.
feeding them and dressing them, training them, and then sallying up early in the morning, riding out in 120-degree temperatures down a 20-mile long fence line looking for a broken fence, get to that broken fence, not have the right tools to fix it, but is just stuck there and is going to have to fix it before he's got to figure it out.
Yeah, just cowboy. So
that's the kind of guys that survive, and that's the kind of guys that do really well in industry and that we want working next to each other.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you get caught in a country in a bad situation. Take the 2019-2020 Australian bushfire season where it was just out of control.
You were down there for that.
I was, yep.
Yeah. How long were you there for that?
A couple months, 3 months. Yeah. So, and you just want that guy next to your side going through it with you.
It's integrity.
It's integrity.
Yeah.
It's that hard work.
I mean, integrity is really like doing the right thing when nobody's looking.
That's right.
You know, and that's the kind of guy you want.
Yeah. With you. There's a lot behind those cool videos and pictures that you don't see. The preparation, the training, the chair flying, the asking good questions and just trying to figure it out, because even for us, there's not a lot out there on how to do it well. So when you see somebody produce this beautiful drop, there's just a lot more behind it. That's an iceberg.
You know, you just said something that when you and I were chatting before the show, like it's almost like you look at it, it's like an art form for you.
It is.
Like listening to you talk about it, like doing a drop, you talked about how it lands, and I got this like, oh, this guy's like is an artist on how to do this.
And that's what I want my legacy to be. I don't necessarily want to be a pilot. You know, I do love flying airplanes, but the term pilot has taken on a different term as technology's progressed. Yeah. Become more lenient on it. The artist thing is a lot more of it, because so much of my brain is dedicated to the fire and what's going on with it, and I can only dedicate a little bit of my brain bites to actually flying the airplane.
Yeah.
So we do leverage a little bit of automation and the orbit and stuff to be able to look outside, and delegation of duties for other people to help traffic deconfliction.
Yeah.
But if it was just about aviation and just about the airplane, I wouldn't be telling 3/4 of the story.
Yeah.
Because there's so much other stuff out there.
Tell me, what is the perfect, just like go back in your brain and think about the perfect drop you did and walk me through it.
The perfect drop?
Yeah. Something you're just like,
I am the hardest person on myself.
When you fly away from me, you're like, that was pretty good. And you look over at your co-pilot, like, you see that? That was pretty good.
No, that's not me. That ain't me. I can't do that because I'm going to screw up the next one. That karma boomerang flies around hard.
So in the future, when you do the perfect drop, what is it going to look like? Tell me what, because I don't know. Like,
you ever skated before?
Skateboarded?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a drop a couple weeks ago that I'm not going to say is my all-time favorite drop, but it was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Because as we're orbiting, I see that the fire was backing downhill at Placerville Airport in California.
Mm-hmm.
And as the fire was backing downhill, there was a strip of grass and then brush and then houses. Yeah. And we always try to use the retardant in the most beneficial areas. So if you drop in the brush is going to turn hotter. You're not going to have as much benefit from that retardant. If you put it in the grass, you're going to get a lot more benefit and a lot more time out of it. Okay. We think of retardant as time. My boss at Cal Fire used to say, we're carrying a tank full of time. And I think that's the most simple way of putting
interesting.
it. So I was looking at this drop and I'm like, oh, that's the perfect width for my retardant, that grass strip that's underslung of the fire. That's about the perfect length. And I could run it straight into that other line, because the dozers were coming off the airport and trying to make access through the fence. They were having trouble. So we needed to buy them more time.
Yeah.
But it was like a bowl, like you would skate into, like a curved half pipe, a quarter pipe.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, if I start a left turn there, it looks almost perfect where I could just concave the entire drop.
Oh, nice.
And start at the corner of the runway and bring it, undersling it, and buy him time.
Yeah.
And I was just looking at it, and the air attack, I think I was number 2 to drop, so they're coordinating with everybody else in the copters. So I'm just sitting there looking at it like, I hope I get that one. I hope I get it. I hope I get it. And then the air tech came up, and he didn't know really how to explain it to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, yep, I got it. I got it. I got that drop.
I've already been watching it.
It's like, really? All right, you cleared the maneuver. I'm like, I'm downwind, and we got to put it in. And it was just as, I shouldn't say fun, but it really is. Because if it's not fun, then we're not being passionate about it. We're not trying to do it exactly right.
It sounds like a lot of fun to me.
It's, even though it's an emergency, if you were to be caught up in the emergency, then you let the emotions get the best of you. And then you start acting impulsively and you start not thinking for yourself. When you make it fun, or you make it, when you're mission oriented, because they're not out there smiling and laughing or anything, I'm taking it very seriously. But when you know your capabilities and you know you have exactly what they want, it's fun. And you push the button and you're like, oh, that felt good. I think that was right. And you make the turn and the airplane is perfectly concaving at the right altitude, spot on. And you come out of it. And now I'm all downhill back to Sacramento. I thought,
can you spin around and have a look at it? Like,
you could, but I'm really proactive. And I would rather have the copters come in and drop their water, because a lot of times they're holding for us. It's hard on their transmissions. I'd rather keep the operations going. So a lot of times I'll just wait for the next load to take a look at how it went in. Or we get evaluations from the air attack.
Oh, you do? Okay.
The air attack sits on top. He's the coordinator. And the air attacks will give us evaluations on each one of our drops. So they'll tell us.
How do they? Is it like a rating system, like that was spot on? Or
we use so laterally we use wingspans. That was a wingspan off to the left. That was a wingspan off to the right. That was a quarter load early. That was half a load late. A full load late is really bad. Just go home and bury your head and embarrass yourself. It's bad.
I mean, you just wasted the load.
You just wasted it.
You did.
Unless you're building a line, somebody can tie into it. But you don't. We're about efficiency. And so I don't want anybody else to clean up my mess, because now we're slowing down the fire. And we're trying to support the guys on the ground to do their job and help them, instead of creating more of a backlog just because you messed up.
Let's talk about, so there's so many things that are going on when, talk about this Placerville. You mentioned bulldozers come in. There's for certain firefighters on the ground, you have varying levels of people in the air. Like, how do you keep track of all that stuff when you're going in? Like there's so many things going on and variables that you need to be aware of, in addition to flying the airplane. And in addition to, I need to drop a line there. Just everything that's going around. How do you manage that?
So I guess the best way to put it is we have different levels of aerial supervision. So different levels of people in command and what they control. So air attack is the second in control of the fire, next to the incident commander. The incident commander is the guy on the ground, or the gal on the ground that controls the entire fire. They're number one. They convey their objectives to the air attack. And the air attack's the one in the air. Air attack controls all of the aerial assets that come on, whether it be fixed wing or rotor wing. The air attack turns the objectives into tactics. How can I best meet the incident commander's objectives with the tools that I have coming? So it's up to them to produce a plan. And then we all form this area called a fire traffic area. And it's something that started in California.
And it did?
It did, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because we just have so many resources, and we've had so many accidents of mid-airs and other things. And so the way that fire traffic area works is 12 miles, you make your first call to get cleared into this fire traffic area. 7 miles that you can't fly past in case you haven't got a clearance, and there's somebody there. And then
we have a helicopter coming through right now, audience, aviators. That's cool.
Good.
That's why we're shooting here, man.
I was just about to talk about helicopters.
I love that. I love the aviation. Let's go. Helicopters and jets. This is perfect.
Bouncing 180s.
Yeah, exactly. We start judging landings. We have a sound check.
Totally. So at 7 miles, it's our no comm ring. So if you haven't got a hold of anybody at the fire and you know somebody's there, you just start orbiting. And you don't go any closer than 7 miles. After 7 miles, the FTA really starts at 5 miles. And so we have a 5 mile ring around the center point of the fire to be able to run our assets in. At 500 feet and below this is MSL now. So, AGL.
AGL, yeah.
500 feet and below, we run the copters. At 1,500 feet and below, we run the fixed wing. At 2,500 feet sits the air attack in a right-hand orbit, orbiting opposite from everybody else who has the best view. And that's what you see the OB-10 Broncos, the Aero Commanders. Some people use King Airs. That's what they're flying.
Yeah.
Kodiaks in other states and things like that. But
And that's a lot. That's a lot going on.
there's a lot of aircraft. I mean, the stuff in Malibu, we had 52 helicopters, I think.
Did you really?
26 tankers, you know, and it's just the coordination can become heavy if you become disorganized.
Yeah.
So it's really important to do as much homework as you can and preload everything.
How much CRM is going on with you and your other pilot? I mean, are you working together like and flying a normal jet or whatever and normal operations? All you're doing is flying the airplane. Now you have all these other variables going on. What's the CRM look like, your crew resource management between you and your other pilot?
There's quite a bit because, you know, I'm flying a 737, the Fireliner.
Yeah.
So we're still running our Boeing approved checklists all the way through it. And we've modified them and gotten them approved by the FAA for our drop checklist. We have a pre-drop checklist to the line and a post-drop. We have a pre-drop checklist and a post-drop checklist. And so we're running those checklists as we're still building our SA and flying into the fire.
Yeah.
So a lot of division of attention. And then as you're getting on the fire, now I'm looking for routes, helicopter routes, because usually you have a dip site where the helicopters go dip, and then a working area where they're working. Most of the time they'll tell you about them. Sometimes it may be too complex or it's too jammed up where something gets missed. We're just trying to back up the air attack or the lead plane, if there's a lead plane there, as to where those helicopters are, because we don't want to get in their way and they definitely don't want to get in ours.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we have wake turbulence too, which could be a bad day for them. So we try to do our best. I usually set up my co-pilots to understand the routing, because not only is it safer for us, but it's going to build up their situational awareness one day when they slide over in my seat.
Sure.
Now they're building that full three-dimensional picture. Okay, where are the other tankers? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, where are the copters? Which copter is the last copter in the daisy chain that after they move, we're going to be cleared to maneuver?
Yeah.
Then you're adjusting your pattern.
So helicopters in first?
It just depends on timing.
Yeah.
Yeah. People do it differently. And I can go over that sequence for you too. But a lot of times we're just changing our orbit to make sure we're in position by the time that last helicopter comes off the drop.
Yeah.
So that if we're clear to maneuver, we can get in and get out as fast as possible, safely, not rushing, but we can get in and get out and do what we need to do without taking excess orbits and tying up the airspace.
How much the people on the ground, right? The firefighters on the ground, they're talking to air attack?
Yes.
Okay. And then how much input do they have on where drops happen? Like, hey, we've got structures here.
We work for them.
Yeah.
You know, they're if they see a need, I'm 1,500 feet above them. I can't see what they can see, you know, but I also can see more than they can see.
Yeah.
But on a macro scale, they're much better at telling us exactly what they need in their plan. If they're going to roll out a hose lay, you know, and they're only able to make access up the left flank, let's say one side of the fire, well, we can start working the back side of that fire and help them slow that down to give them time to get around that back side of the fire.
Yeah.
So we're constantly coordinated with them to figure out, hey, what are your needs? What's your access? You know, because if their access is only up one steep hill and we decide to drop on that steep hill, now we just made that steep hill super muddy and full of retardant, and you start slipping.
Yeah. So
we view ourselves as we work for the guys on the ground.
Okay.
And how can we most efficiently help them?
Yeah. It's almost like the relationship between soldiers and the aerial support military has.
Same way. Stack's very similar. Yeah. Absolutely. Very, very, very similar.
Yeah. Do you guys find a lot of military guys gravitating to aviation?
We do.
Fire attack?
We do. What we find surprisingly is, you know, the military does a very good job in training their pilots to a high quality. Yeah. Especially the ones that we've gotten. We've got some guys out of the weapons school. Our company, Colson Aviation, has hired some guys out of the 160th for our QRF. You know, we're finding some really good guys.
Cool.
Sometimes we find that it's hard to get them to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Because they've been taught to stay in the box. And not be able the creative liberty to be able to think for themselves. And once you unlock that in somebody, and once you leverage that potential inside them and watch them grow out of it, there's nothing more gratifying.
Yeah, it's interesting. Creativity, you've brought that up several times about the creativity in the flying and what you guys are doing. And I think it's a really important, you know, hearing, you know, just what you've talked about so far, going into these environments. And we're actually in one of these environments you fought fires in.
Yeah.
We're in San Ynez, California. This is fire country. You know, we've all been, I mean, there was just a big fire right
The
over
lake
here
fire
by,
right there. Yeah.
yeah, by Zaca Lake. I mean, you can, right there.
Yeah.
Were you dropping on that one?
No, I'm a state resource, and that was a federal fire.
That was federal? Okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just, it's constant out here. We see it all the time. So it's, you know, it's you know, it's fascinating to talk about this stuff. I wanted to tell you a quick story. When I owned a house in Santa Barbara, we were having it was a fire called the Hesacita fire. And it was like burned right into town. It was like right on top of, I lived in a part of town called Mission Canyon. And we were in literally like this big canyon next to our house. And the fire, it was burning down the mountain, and it was really late at night, like after dark for hours, and this fire was just blowing up and burning down the canyon, and the winds. All of a sudden, helicopters showed up in the middle of the night, smoke everywhere, and they're flying in, like below the rim of the canyon, dropping in and out, one in, one out, and they did it all night long. And my neighbor was also, he was a firefighter, not an aerial firefighter, but and we were at the house. I stayed there, and we were gonna, you know, fight the fire if it comes to our houses. And he's like, yeah, they're on night vision goggles. And he was kind of explaining a little to me, but I was blown away at what these guys were doing. Like it was, I mean, they saved our houses, one, so they're heroes in our opinion. I mean, and that's, I think, when people see these fires happening and they see the aerial tankers come in, like they don't, like, you guys are doing I mean, this is a job that is really, really important. And it's almost like you guys you don't get the credit, you know, you don't get the credit and you're such a humble guy. And you know, we need to like do something. There was that, you know, we talked a little bit about, the only thing I've learned about aerial firefighting is from the movie Planes.
Yeah, totally.
With Dusty Cropper being
not a bad one. It's a pretty good movie. My
kids and I learned it together. I don't know.
Yeah. You know, in saying that, I don't think we deserve as much credit as we get already, to be honest, because a couple nights ago, my friend, he's actually battalion chief in the battalion that I live in, but we've been friends for a long time. He was in the air program for CAL FIRE. Hope he returns soon to the air program, but for now he's in the field. And he went to a traffic collision called TC in town in the middle of the night one night. Involved a couple kids, pretty bad. The next day, still on shift during the day. Next night, structure fire in the middle of the night. Was up with the structure fire. He was the BC on it, so he was in charge of it. Was getting off work and gets a deployment to the park fire at 1 a.m. on the third night. So now they've got to drive all night to Chico. At 7 a.m., they have to start engaging, and they got a 24-hour shift they got to work. Meanwhile,
really,
yeah, I initial attacked the park fire with a couple guys, a couple other tankers, and you know, we flew it until just about sunset when the shadows started getting long and it started getting a little bit murky, and we called it quits.
Yeah, and
then I went home to the Marriott, the Hilton actually.
Yeah,
you know, I slept all night in my bed and not worried about anybody calling me in the middle of the night. Showed up to work at 8 a.m. the next morning, went at the park fire all day again the next day, went at it all again, you know, repeated that process over a week and a half. And we did the best we could. Yeah. But there's guys out there and dozers and engines and there's so many guys out there actively putting out the fire where we're just slowing it down that deserve so much more of the credit than we do, because they're really, really, really putting a lot more effort than we are. Yeah. We get to do cool things, but we're not as cool as they are.
Well, I mean, it's pretty cool. You're being very humble, and I appreciate that. And it's an important role. And it's interesting. You look at slowing the fire down rather than putting it out. That's something you've said several times. What's the difference? I mean, you guys are putting fires out often, but you're really looking at more as like slowing the bigger fire down?
We really don't put out any fire. The only fire, you know, we put out is maybe in shorter grass, and you could actually blacken a line then. But anything in the brush and trees, I've shown up to countries before to where I'm meeting with the governments and they're giving me a talking to because I put a retardant line in the middle of a timber stand. There's trees, 300-foot timber stand all the way around. Yeah, and the fire just blew right through it, and they want to know what I did wrong. And I'm like, well, that's not actually what it's engineered for. Yeah, it's a retardant. Right. We have retardant and we have suppressants.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So a suppressant would be like a gel or water. Yeah. Where you're actually dropping on the flames. Yeah. But we're dropping in the green
Yeah.
in front of the flames, trying to turn that wood into carbon quicker, so it reduces the burn and reduces the intensity to allow the dozers or the guys on the ground to get in there and actually put the fire out.
Yeah. Well, that's it. You've done this all over the world. Tell me about your international experience. And because you when you said something that the government was talking to you, there's got to be different operating rules and like different processes and systems and best practices everywhere you go. Like, how is that pretty hard to keep up on? Tell me about some of your experience flying. You mentioned Australia.
It's very hard to keep up on, because if you go to Europe, they have their own way of doing things. Depends on which country you're in. Greece is very military run, and so they have their own way of doing things that works for them. You have Spain, which has had a program for a long time, and they rely heavily on scoopers. So their program looks different, how they work. Portugal is a newer one, but they're also different in the way they do things. Down in South America, you have Argentina, who primarily use helicopters, and then you have Chile, who's just now starting to use fixed-wing tankers. And I've only flown in Chile, but we're all just trying to figure out how we can coexist between the different cooperators who are chartering these helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. Yeah. And we don't quite have the organization that we need to be able to deconflict each other.
Yeah.
But we're still out there providing good work, and we're very, actually this year we've set our own citation down there just to assist in controlling the aircraft to make sure everybody's spaced out and there's an extra set of eyes in the sky to make sure everybody's safe. And that's just the way you grow as a program. In the 1960s, when we started, we've killed so many people here in the United States just off learning.
Yeah. It's not funny, but it's like,
yeah, totally.
It's
like, I love our policies and procedures only because I knew it's on the backs of so many guys that made mistakes that were just part of the learning process. Yeah. We've done a good job of capturing those problems and then creating like policies to be able to make it safer and make it better.
Yeah.
And
well, it is that's how we learn, right? We develop rules and regulations, policies, procedures, SOPs, all because something got screwed up sometime in the past.
Yep.
And we had to put something in place. So, and it's not only like when you operate under SOPs, I think it's really important as aviators to know why we're doing this. A lot of pilots don't ask that.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, we do it because the manual tells us to do it, but why are we doing it this way? So
a lot of time on a fire, I try to find the why, because it helps me achieve the goal more precisely.
Yeah.
If I know exactly what you're trying to do, or if I can read it, then I best know what to do with my airplane to help you.
Yeah.
I think the why is very important.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if it's a really bad why and I really have to risk, then I'm going to be more susceptible to say, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not comfortable.
That's good. I mean, that shows your maturity as an aviator and human being. So,
well, I think I told you on the phone, but one of my new favorite sayings is I used to think that risk is the sexiest chick muse I've ever met in my life, and I just chased her around for years, like a rabid dog, and then I slept with her, and I've lost a few friends.
Yeah,
and it's
how does that? Tell me about how does that?
It wasn't that great.
I mean, I know you've lost some friends that are really close to you doing the same job you're doing now. How, and you have wife and kids, you want to get home. Where does that sit in your mind when you're going into a really dangerous environment? Not doing a dangerous job, but going into a dangerous environment, right?
Well, it's the why. Mm-hmm. It's the why. Like, I'm not really willing to put myself in a bad situation, not a bad situation, but a more aggressive situation, unless we're saving life and property. And when you're creating an egress for firefighters that are trapped, or you're dropping around a neighborhood to where those people don't have anything, or you're dropping in there was talk about putting a line when the campfire was going off in Paradise just to help get Skyline Road up there. I forgot what it's called, but helping with the egress of all the cars to get out of town so it doesn't burn over.
Yeah.
Those are the pieces that we get in return that makes it all worth it for my family.
Yeah.
And that risk to be okay to bear, because you're actually out there making a difference. I would have a hard time being gone as much as I am away from my kids unless I knew I was making a positive impact. Yeah. And not only a positive impact on people on the ground, but being able to share my stories that I've learned through tragedy, through just general experience, through being in the business for 12 years,
Yeah.
and passing that along to the next generation to ensure a better, safer culture,
Yeah.
a more effective, safer culture.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you're talking about is really effective leadership, and you can exercise leadership at all levels of life, whether it's your family, whether it's in the environment in a cockpit, an individual. And the psychology of what you're talking about is really important. And it oftentimes comes at the expense of tragedy.
It does.
And bad shit happening, What are some of the things that, do you like have a mantra that when you're in a leadership position, you're the captain on an airplane, you have all of these things going on, the people, the whys around it, right? The people on the ground you're trying to protect, your crew members, your other aviators. What is your mantra and the mindset that keeps y'all safe?
Unlock people's potential.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I were just to be out there on my own, then I'm essentially single pilot, even though I have a large crew between co-pilots, crew chiefs, engineers, mechanics. I find it much more valuable, much more fulfilling to go around and unlock the potential of each one of my crew members and figure out their story, figure out who their wife is, if they have kids, where they live, where they grew up. Right now I'm the only American on my crew, so it's a little bit foreign, and their perspective isn't the same as mine. Yeah. And so there's a lot I could learn from their perspective if I just sit back and listen.
Yeah.
And once I sit back and listen and get to know them enough, then I can figure out where their skill set is, where they're kind of lacking and where they're strong in. So where they're strong in, I could use in the cockpit right away. Yeah. Where they're lacking, we can start working on it and working towards this goal of being the best tanker pilot or the best tanker out there. Yeah. Because now we have a cohesive crew. A lot of times the mechanics get left out of the whole scheme because they're just mechanics. Yeah. But you help those mechanics understand the operation that we're doing to a deeper level, then they start working harder for you. They make sure everything's cocked for you. Yeah. They make sure that everything is absolutely perfectly topped up. And some of my guys even sit on the airplane and wait for the text to say dispatch. That way we get out quicker. Yeah. Because I've taught them that a fire, we're not out here as a company. Of course, the company's out there to maintain its status as a company. You can't just go defunct. But for an operator, as far as we're concerned, all fires start small. Yeah. And they grow exponentially minute by minute. Yeah. And at the hour mark, now you're dealing with the potential when you're going to have to be fired for the next couple of days. Yeah. So what is 5 minutes when it comes to fire? 5 minutes is a lot. Yeah. And the second you start rushing, then you start causing issue because you're being impulsive again. Yeah. So if you can figure out a proactive urgency in a well-oiled crew, then we start acting with confidence in a pretty quick fashion.
I mean, where's that balance? There's a balance there you have to between urgency and doing it precisely.
Yeah.
How do you balance? How do you figure that balance out?
That balance is like a rev limiter inside of me, to where sometimes my ops tempo is a little bit too high for the crew that I have. Yeah. And it's time to back off for a second. Okay. And it was to slow down the taxi, maybe not pull out of the pit right away, make sure everybody's caught up, checking in on everybody. And if I've worked with them for a while, I can kind of understand where they're at mentally. If they're back with me, it's time to go again. Okay. If my ops temp is too high, I just slow it down a little bit. Yeah. Because we're only going to be as strong as our weakest guy. Yeah. And not necessarily just for the drop. If anything were to go wrong, I don't want them hanging off the rudder. I want them right there with me as a second set of eyes or third set of eyes if the crew member's on board.
So how do you get them back? So I'm gonna give you a scenario. You have a new co-pilot you're flying with, right? And you guys just did something that was at his 100% or maybe beyond. It was 110%. But you were over here at 75%. And you just lost them, right? They're frozen. They just how do you get them back? How do you like, hey man, we got to stay in this together?
Usually let them finish what they're doing. If they can't finish what they're doing because they're so lost, then we just stop altogether and I help them through to get to a checkpoint. Yeah. You build a foundation. Okay, we're here. Yeah. Taxi checklist complete. Let's run the before start checklist. Boop, 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 and we start getting a tempo again. Yeah. And once we get that tempo, good, close it. Yeah. I never move on to the next thing without completing that task that he's working on with him to make sure that we are in step. And then I'm much more cautious about the ops tempo, therefore going forward, just to make sure, giving him or her a little bit extra time in completing tasks and compartmentalizing. Because as soon as you start blending thoughts in a cockpit, it gets really dangerous.
Yeah.
Because your emotions are starting to touch everything.
Yeah.
We're meant to remain objective.
Yeah.
We're meant to like just do what we're supposed to do and think about certain things and keep bandwidth open so we can focus on all these external inputs.
Yeah.
So I just try to maintain a pace that's going to facilitate that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Who mentored you?
A lot. The guys that made it through the years that they were losing friends every year. You know, the guys that were flying underpowered, radial engine, clunkers that they would have to work on at night themselves.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, it's a different generation. I am like weak when it compares to them. But they, being an underpowered 4-engine radial engine aircraft, you know, when you lose an engine, you don't necessarily have the performance to get yourself out of it. So that's where you start thinking about orthographic lift.
Yeah.
You start thinking about where is the wind? You know, what am I going to fly into if I can't get rid of the load?
Yeah.
These guys were the ones that just buried it in my head to think a certain way and just beat it into me over and over and over again about what it is to be a tanker pilot. And again, that's where listening came in, because sometimes when I think, I got it, I don't want to hear anymore. I got it.
Yeah.
It started to be a detriment at one point in my career because I was young. I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
And once I realized that there's more I need to listen to, and that until I stop flying and I throw the keys away, then I have to keep listening and I have to keep my options open. I can't turn that old dog that can't learn new tricks, because we're getting faster jets.
Yeah.
We're getting, we just bought 737-700s that we're going to be taking on board. That's going to be the new learning set. So you always have to maintain that adaptability to make sure you're operating at your highest level.
Sure. And I would imagine that, to do this job, you've got to have a certain level of ego, right? But to do it really, really well, you have to have a certain amount of humility.
That's the hardest balance right there you're talking about. You want to talk about balance, that one gets hard.
Like, how do you balance that ego and humility? I mean, as cocky, it's probably, there's that old joke, right? What's the difference between God and a pilot? God doesn't think he's a pilot.
Yeah.
So we all kind of have it.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
But there's also the thing that keeps us safe, and that's humility.
Yeah.
And how do you balance that as not only yourself, but also with the young guys that are coming up behind you, the next gen that are coming in? They're younger than you.
Yeah.
They're better looking than you. They've got,
I just tell them they're stupid and worthless. Works for me. No, kidding. With me, like, internally with that ego thing, because it's real,
Yeah.
I monitor complacency. And in the airplane, if I become complacent and we're doing the same thing, and I look back and I see that we've been doing really good for the last couple of days, I realize that I arrived at complacency because I think I'm good. I think I'm fine. I don't need to be so attentive. Yeah. And I start making mistakes. Then I'm like, oh, you're getting cocky right now. All right. And then I try to find a way to reset, which is I always have to find a new way to reset myself to get back engaged. Like, you're not that good. You're only as good as your last drop. And that last one sucked. So, it was funny. Like, when you go back to the hotel at night, either the car's quiet, if it was a bad couple drops, or it's like super loud and jovial if you did like something really good that day. So I much prefer the jovial car rides. Yeah. And that takes a lot of attentiveness and intentionality. Yeah. As far as the new guys coming into it, it really has to be tailored to the personality of who we're talking to. Yeah. I've had a lot of co-pilots that would just go around and buy every single tanker-based teacher and go on social media and post everything that we're doing and these fires and how we're out being heroes, Oh, yeah. And that bothers me because that's not what we're out doing. We find happiness in the results that we provide, not necessarily in the glory that we receive from the public. Yeah. And if you're self-glorifying on social media about what you've done, you're kind of screwing up the whole merit of what we're doing. We're not here to self-gloat or say we're the best. Yeah. Because there's a lot out there to learn, especially for a new guy that just came into the business. If you only have 3 or 4 years of experience and maybe only flown in California, there's a large world out there with a lot to learn, especially listening to this old generation that we might think is all getting slow and old and needs to move on. Yeah. But there's a lot of minerals and gems locked into those people that if you get them talking and you start understanding, you start mining the stuff out of them and you're like, man, that's a really cool way of thinking about it. Yeah. But they've been hangar flying for twice as long as I've been alive. Yeah. So, just remaining remaining agile and adaptable is the most important part about this, and the humility aspect is gigantic, because you're not the only one out there hanging it out there.
I mean, the humility component to, like, it'll catch up to them, right? They you know, if you have you have this unhealthy balance between ego and humility usually catches up at some point, right? Hopefully it doesn't catch up in a catastrophic way. You know, it's just a little scare here and there.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the things that's, there's so much experience out there in the world, and one of the things I'm getting, I have the opportunity now with this podcast to talk to people like you and learn different things and different mindsets, but there's just a very similar common thread with all aviation that I'm learning, right? Whether, one of my guy that works for me is a former Blue Angel pilot. And
cool.
I mean, he was the most precise of the precise, and he's just very similar mindset that you have. You guys are like very similar people, and the airline guys are kind of they have the same thing. It's just obviously a different job. So I'm learning a lot about the different. I've always been stuck in this little area of aviation, and I'm just really enjoying getting to really dig into different parts of it. So this is really cool.
I agree with that mindset. For a while I had this co-pilot named Grizz, and he was a weapons school instructor, Top Gun graduate, and then he became an instructor later on in his career in the Marines. And then he went on to a career with Southwest Airlines, who had been flying this airplane for 25 years.
Yeah.
And then he became my co-pilot. And I'm like, this is freaking backwards, dude. Like, it's like, when I first started flying with him, I'm like, man, there's so much I can learn from you. Just like, keep saying it. I know this is backwards. You just don't know fire.
Yeah.
We'll teach you fire. We'll get you there. But holy hell. And then getting up the air and seeing the way he handled himself, it's like, those are the type of guys I want to emulate.
Yeah.
I made my kid's godfather is a lieutenant colonel in the Delta Force, retired.
Oh, cool.
But just because I liked the way he looked at things operationally.
Yeah.
And on his retirement plaque, when they gave it to him, all it said was, thanks.
Really?
Yeah. And I can get down with that. Yeah.
Like that.
Because it's not about the showmanship. It's about getting the work done correctly.
Yeah.
And the results.
So it sounds like, the things that keep the mindset that you have, and we've talked a lot about leadership here, mentorship, and the common thread for me is what keeps you safe is humility, and you emulate that, right? You're obviously, my view of you is you're, a very precise aviator. And most of the aviators that I know that are just the top-notch people that are precise, that are the best at what they do, they don't need recognition, and they just got to do the job.
I don't think I would ever be fulfilled off of recognition.
Yeah. What do you, your kids, do your kids know? Are they old enough to kind of know what you do and see the things in the media, and are they seeing any of these things yet?
Yeah.
When they see their dad?
It's freaking great. When it's raining outside, my oldest son, Jasper, he'll come out and be like, Dad, it's raining outside. Firefighters won't be busy today.
Really?
Yeah. He thinks about the firefighters, and
does he?
They go out in the yard. Like, we have a little front patio, and they'll draw in chalk little fires.
Oh,
and they have little water toys, and they'll go put out the fires in the chalk and stuff.
Really?
And they'll come out to the air base. They just came out, and the guys dressed them all up in the high vis and gave them headsets.
Yeah.
And they set them up in front of my parking attendant.
Yeah.
And they all came in, and they parked me, dude. And my freaking heart exploded all over the window, and I couldn't see anything. It was amazing.
That's so
but they're
cool.
starting to embrace it. I mean, I just bought this 180 a couple weeks back, and now I'm starting to take them flying.
Yeah.
And my youngest son's turning 3 in a couple days, and we took off over Los Osos, and for whatever reason out of the blue, he goes, "We're flying!" And it was the coolest thing ever. And I'm like, oh man, yes. Like, that's the stuff I'm getting fulfillment out of. That's what aviation's all about.
Oh, it's the next generation, man. I love it.
It's
so cool. And the people we love, bringing them in and doing that. And, well, Shawn, I want to thank you, man, for being on the show today. And I want to thank you for what you do. I know you're a humble guy, but you and your fellow aerial firefighters you guys are heroes. You keep us safe. It's been really close to me, and we live in California, and you pretty much affect everyone here. And we really I just, on behalf of myself, the Flight Club podcast, I just wanted to say thank you for what you do, and thank you for being on Flight Club.
I feel fortunate to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Flight Club podcast. Please subscribe to the show, leave a comment below, and follow us on Instagram at Flight Club Pod. We'll see you next time.